Today I'm going to be reading Psalm 139, verses 13 through 18, using a Lectio Divina practice. Lectio Divina means divine reading. It's an ancient spiritual practice of approaching Scripture, and instead of analyzing a passage intellectually, we will try to hear the words with the ear of the heart. I will read the passage 4 times with instructions for each passage. Listen with the ear of the heart. Notice if a phrase or a word or a sentence stands out to you, and gently turn it over in your mind. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God! How vast is the sum of them! Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Next, reflect while the passage is read a second time. Notice what thoughts, feelings, and reflections arise within you. Let the words echo in your heart. What might be being asked of you through this passage? For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. You saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book, before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God! How vast is the sum of them! Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. This third time, respond as you listen. Notice any prayerful response that arises within you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God! How vast is the sum of them! Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. This last reading, rest in God's presence beyond thoughts and reflections. Just be. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you.
I don't know how the stress of this pandemic has affected you, but I've had some difficulty sleeping. I wake up several times a night for no particular reason, and then struggle to stay awake during the day. I've been reading articles about how many people are experiencing lack of sleep, mostly due to stress, the disruption of normal schedules, increased screen time, etc. And I can't help but think that this stress is also amplified by loss of income, overwhelm for those working at home, perhaps even more so for those essential workers working in person, and just the loneliness we've been experiencing due to social distancing. It is really no wonder that our bodies, that my body, cannot seem to relax in a normal way. However, much of what we've been experiencing has been normal for our circumstances. For example, the anxiety I experience when going out in public helps to keep me safe and alert, protecting myself and others. The anger and horror I have felt in witnessing the violence against George Floyd and numerous others in this country has moved me to take action for justice and equity. The discomfort I have felt in my places of privilege has helped me to examine and evaluate my role in dismantling systemic racism. With so many emotions going on, the question rises for me: how do I live and make a home, literally and figuratively, with these emotions? Thinkers throughout the ages have recognized that it's not simply emotion that causes distress, but the resistance to the idea of experiencing discomfort. William James, who is known as the first American psychologist, recognized that the mind and body were not separate, unlike many thinkers before him. Emotions for James were as much physiological as they were psychological. In his work, The Varieties of Religious Experience, published in 1902, James writes that healthy religious practice helps the practitioner embrace and integrate physical and mental distress. However, this means that those who seek to benefit from religious practice must accept the existence of hardship, particularly hardship that has no apparent reason or purpose. If an individual holds a completely optimistic understanding of faith, it is likely to crumble when we encounter suffering or witness the suffering of others. This kind of faith really only works when one can maintain control of the environment. James writes that the core of the religious problem is the cry for help. He writes of the experience of true pain, not the conception or intellectual perception of evil or pain, but the grisly, blood-freezing, heart-palsying sensation of it close upon one, and no other conception or sensation is able to live for a moment in its presence. How irreverently remote seem all our usual refined optimisms and intellectual and moral consolations in the presence of a need of help like this. Here is the real core of the religious problem, the cry, "Help, help." No prophet can claim to bring a final message unless he says things that will have a sound of reality in the ears of victims such as these. End quote. Forcing excessive optimism when faced with this kind of pain can result in a dissociation from the body. There is a denial of this mental and physical pain in order to keep one's faith framework intact. I think we can see this today in the numbers of people, and including at times myself, who really wish to deny the reality of the various hardships in this country and just continue moving forward with the status quo. Just as I begin to feel self-righteous, however, I am such a good Christian because I recognize there is so much pain in the world. James says this dissociation or divided self can happen in overly pessimistic understandings of faith too. Getting stuck in what James calls radical pessimism, the idea that everything in this world is primarily pain and suffering, can also create a divided self. He says the mind can become stuck in what I think of as the impossible chess match of reconciling a good and merciful God with the problem of pain. Therefore, a reunification of the self does not necessarily come from the alignment of ideas and philosophies, nor necessarily from an improvement of the external environment. In a letter, Leo Tolstoy discusses his shift out of what he calls a melancholic state. Whilst my intellect was working, he says, something else was working too. A consciousness of life, as I may call it, which was like a force that obliged my mind to fix itself in another direction and draw me out of my situation of despair. I can call this by no other name than that of a thirst for God. This craving for God had nothing to do with the movement of my ideas. In fact, it was the direct contrary of that movement. But it came from my heart. Over a century later, one of my favorite modern theologians, Richard Rohr, would describe this phenomenon as oneing, spelled O-N-E-I-N-G, or the number one made into a verb. He actually borrowed the term from St. Julian of Norwich, a woman who experienced severe chronic pain during her lifetime. In one of his many books, Father Richard laments the lack of understanding most of Christian history has brought to the idea of incarnation. Incarnation traditionally refers to the idea of Jesus becoming embodied in the world. The idea that God's love is manifest in this physical world does not typically extend to our personal notions of embodiment. While he makes it clear that he does not wish physical suffering upon anyone, He says that being open to the sensations of the body allow us to know God's incarnate presence. In my understanding, through incarnation comes salvation. The word salvation is related to the word salve, an Old English word referring to a cream or ointment. Salvation in that case is not protection from future hardships, whether in this life or beyond, but a healing from the wounds that have been incurred in the process of living our lives. So, how do we manage to heal our souls, mind, and body from the pain brought to us in these times? Physical distress requires physical solutions. This has not been a secret in world religious traditions, and I'm not saying anything new today. But as one of my preaching professors often says, preachers preach the message they need to hear. In fact, while I was writing this sermon, I had been on the computer for several hours, after days of being on the computer for several hours, and I was frustrated to the point of being in tears. I'm living at home, and we were sitting on the couch, and I had my laptop, and my mom gently closed my laptop and took it away from me and said, "You're done," reminding me of the very wisdom I was trying to preach. I have with me my father's old rosary from his first communion. And also I am wearing some mala beads given to me by my teaching assistant when I was taking a course on the Dalai Lama. These prayer beads are a tactile form of prayer that allows the practitioner to remain present. Prayer beads, labyrinths, practices such as meditation, contemplative prayer, yoga, and qigong all act in a similar way. Some of these practices may be more strenuous than others, but most gently remind us to remain with our bodies, and perhaps even engage in a sort of surrender to what our bodies experience, even if this experience is discomfort. Theologian Paul Tillich calls this the courage to accept acceptance and to participate in the ground of being. In closing, I would like to engage in the simplest form of meditation, which is awareness of the breath. In Hebrew, the word for God, which in English is sometimes pronounced Yahweh, is actually not a pronounceable word. It is the inspiration, Yah, and the expiration, way, of the breath. Richard Rohr says of this, "For Jews, God's name was the first and last word to pass their lips. By your very breathing, you are praying and participating in God's grace." So let us now breathe. I leave you with this benediction from St. Julian of Norwich. You will have pain and affliction, trouble, strain, and doubt, but you shall not be overcome, and all shall be well. Yes, all shall be well, and all shall be well. I shall find my ground in God, and shall see for myself that all manner of things shall be well. Amen.
Join us today for Sunday Seminar, where we will have a concert celebrating independence, however known. We will feature a variety of UCG ensembles and musicians. Join us, 11:15 on Zoom.
Thank you for joining us at the United Church of Gainesville today. To learn more about who we are and what we believe and to support our ministry, please visit ucgainesville.org.